Jeez.
All right. Good morning, everyone. How are we doing? Come in, get settled. Wonderful. Well, again, good morning, and thank you for joining us for our 9th annual Startup Boston Week. Our mission with this conference is simple: to bring together the entire startup community across every industry, department, and funding stage. Startup Boston exists to connect, educate, and celebrate this ecosystem while serving as a trusted, unbiased guide to the best resources that can help you start and scale your startup or your team. My name is Elena Lobianco. I work for TriNet. We're an HR services company that partners with startups to help them grow and scale compliantly and efficiently. I will be your hostess today. Before we dive in, I do want to give a huge thank you to Suffolk University. Suffolk has hosted us and partnered with us for the past 3 years, providing this space in kind because of their deep commitment to supporting Boston's startup community. If you're interested in exploring entrepreneurship, they offer a variety of programs and opportunities. They also have a table right out there in the vendor hall, so be sure to stop by and learn how they can support your journey or how you might be able to get involved supporting their entrepreneurial students as well. Today's session this morning, we have a really great set of panelists, building faster AI. If this is not what you had in mind, I still recommend that you stick around anyways because it's going to be a great conversation. I'm going to pass the mic over to Barbara Elliott. She's going to be our wonderful moderator. And without further ado, on to the session. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome to Startup Boston and welcome to our session. So I'm Barbara Elliott. I'm part of HPE Enterprise. Not sure if anybody's familiar. We're not the printer people. Everyone seems to think that. We were just talking about that's a common misnomer. I'm in a unique role because about 2.5 years ago, the organization made a decision to put a new focus on a new market, and so I am an account executive in what's called digital native brands. We sell both to startups as well as some of the neoclouds that have arisen into demand over the last little bit. And we're gonna make this session pretty interactive. We're gonna share with you what we're seeing in the marketplace, and love to get some feedback and see if you agree. And hopefully, you'll learn something about how you can have alternatives to infrastructure to start up, or how you can become part of the NVIDIA network. So I'm gonna pass it to Clyde.
Introductions?
Yes.
Okay, so my name's Clyde Gillard. I'm actually local. I live in Gloucester. Some people are from Queens, New York. Where are you? So I was asked to be here. My role, I work for HPE. My role is the AI go-to-market leader for what we call industry accounts, which are our largest strategic accounts in North America. This spans a number of different verticals. So that means, health and life sciences. That means FSI. That means retail. It does not mean federal. It does not mean SLED. But for the rest of those verticals, my responsibility is to help drive AI opportunities for HPE. That involves working with NVIDIA almost every single day. No surprise, they are the prom queen of AI. And so that's my role and function at HPE. And it's a pleasure to be here in downtown Boston.
All right. Pleasure to meet you all. My name is Colin Crowder. I am one of the AI specialists at Hewlett Packard Enterprise, specifically in our compute space. So that's anything that is processing. And I'm also based out of here in Boston. I cover our New England territory, but I work everything from enterprise to SLED, our state, local, and education departments, small, medium businesses looking to grow. So a lot of various different types of industries and market segments and people who are at different stages of this AI journey. So that's a little bit about my background. Thank you all for having us.
Fantastic. How many people know about HPE Enterprise? Okay, we've got a pretty good,
Phew.
Yeah, well, we've been an enterprise company, like I said, for a long time. We've been around for a long time, but this is a different direction that we're taking with expanding our offerings into new communities. So thanks for having us. So I'm just trying to get a feel for, before we kind of go through the Q&A portion, How many founders do we have? Show of hands. Okay, perfect. How many of your organizations are using hyperscalers today? Okay. Oh, wow. Is anybody developing AI solutions? Okay, perfect, perfect. Then I think this will be very informative. So one of the things that we want to talk about is why GPUs, specifically NVIDIA, this is the rise of NVIDIA the last couple of years, why are AI companies turning to GPUs and why would they use GPUs over CPUs? So I'm going to turn it to Clyde first for his perspective.
Spotlight. So it's probably a good place to start. I apologize, my voice, I guess, is loud. But GPUs, right, fundamentals here, in case anybody wants to just start from the basement, they're designed for parallel processing, right? And that's essential for training and running AI models. And that allows you to accelerate your model training faster, right, by literally an order of magnitude over CPUs. CPUs do what they do well. GPUs do what they do well. And faster training means faster iterations, right? Faster for innovation. And just to expand on that, right? When you think about GPUs handling thousands of operations simultaneously with this parallel processing, it optimizes that whole sequential tasks. Again, CPUs aren't really designed for that. So that faster iteration cycles reduces your time to market. And so in AI in particular, it leverages this kinds of technology. So you can easily scale, which is the other great thing about CPUs. You don't need to have a whole infrastructure set up right away. Start and build with a few GPUs and then scale your business and your needs as your business grows, right? And this means that you can prototype fast, you can scale intelligently, right? And avoid over-investing. And for startups, this is a startup-oriented conversation. You have the ability to keep your capital costs low to start and build your process. And then I guess the other thing that's important to note about GPUs and why it's a great place for AI in particular is there's a number of software tools to help accelerate your development. I don't work for NVIDIA, it's on my badge somewhere here, but I work with them every single day, right? NVIDIA has a whole toolkit that you can use to help accelerate your whole development process. This toolkit, think CUDA, if you've heard of CUDA before. This is a pretty robust toolkit. NVIDIA software toolkits, they have NIMs, they have solution accelerators. All of these tools are pre-built and ready for you to plug and leverage and use. So when you think about GPUs, all these services are available for you. So, GPUs just aren't cool. They're really the right foundation solution if you're looking at AI technology and building AI solutions. That would be my answer.
And I was going to add to that. Technically, they're the only game in town when it comes to GPUs, so they really do rule the market.
Well, AMD would, argue with you a little bit on that. I mean, if you look at AMD stock, they're doing well. No one can really beat what NVIDIA's stock has done over the past 18 months. If you follow stock, oh my God, holy crap, right? I mean, I don't know if there's ever been anything like it. I missed the boat, so, that's why I'm here still working. But, AMD's done a pretty good job well. And if you look at who can compete with NVIDIA, AMD is a good call. But I would say this. Don't make the mistake, NVIDIA, you think of NVIDIA as a hardware company, they have 3 times more software engineers than hardware engineers. What does that tell you? It tells you that those toolkits like CUDA are incredibly important because once you build, you're probably going to stick with what you built on. There are translators to bring you to different GPUs from CUDA, but it's the software development tools that really lock you in. And when you look at 3x software engineers over hardware engineers, that needs to tell you something. And it's of value. I'm not trying to make a commercial for NVIDIA, but if you're a developer, if you're a startup and you really want to get going, what they've done with customized LLMs, what they've done with their CUDA tool belts, really are pretty outrageous and pretty handy. So they are almost the only game in town, but not quite the only game in town. So give a little shout out to AMD when you can.
Absolutely. And, NVIDIA is owning the market because they have prided themselves as being a developer-first organization. So the ecosystem of tools they have tied to taking advantage of their GPUs is just so robust that nobody in the market can really take advantage of it now, which is why we say NVIDIA is really leading the market. Expanding on why GPUs? Really the CPU is going to be your Swiss Army knife, whereas the GPU is going to be the the knife you're going to use in a high-end kitchen, right? You wouldn't necessarily bring the Swiss Army knife to chop up vegetables when you're serving hundreds of people a day, but at the same time, if you also need a corkscrew or to open up a package, it's a great tool to do many different things. In reality, AI can exist on anything. You can run AI on your phone. In fact, some of them may currently do that. The issue is how long you're willing to wait for it to finish. So, you could train an LLM on it, but it might take you a couple centuries or millennium versus being able to do it in a matter of weeks or days. And so this leap in processing really kind of brings to the forefront price and performance for GPUs, because a lot of organizations don't have an infinite budget for this AI stuff. A lot of it can be risky. It can be, are we going to see are we going to be earning more money or saving money by implementing this tool and investing in all this infrastructure? And so price and performance is really the biggest key that we're looking for in moving to GPUs, because that's how we're able to maximize that time to value, but also the measure of investment we need to put into these AI applications.
Fantastic. And I should have kicked it off a little bit but about our partnership with NVIDIA. So we are an NVIDIA OEM partner. We partner with them in selling their GPUs into all levels of our compute and high performance computing. And we also have co-developed a private AI cloud with NVIDIA and the software stack out of the box. So we are one of their premier partners. And so I realized that you might be saying, well, how do you guys all interact? We have a partnership, and we are the vehicle to fulfill a lot of their software and hardware to the clients. The other question I wanted to ask you as we go through this, I saw we had a couple of people developing AI applications. Are you doing LLMs or inferencing? Both?
Both.
We're doing mostly inferencing, but we're looking at LLMs.
Okay. Anyone else?
Inferencing.
Inferencing? Okay. Perfect. That's helpful. So another question we get asked a lot is, how can startups avoid over-engineering their AI infrastructure?
Well, that lands on me again. One comment on the partnership. NVIDIA, HPE is considered an OEM, just like Dell, just like Lenovo, all good. One of the things that HPE has done, Antonio Neri, our CEO, and Jensen Huang, the CEO of NVIDIA, got together about 2 years ago and recognizes that AI is big, especially enterprise, but there's a barrier to entry, right? How do you get started? And they did co-engineer and co-develop a platform specifically optimized to run AI. That's called Private Cloud AI. It's pretty cool. So, if you want to talk about the tight-knit relationship that we have in NVIDIA, that is unique to HPE and NVIDIA. So look, HPE and NVIDIA. So look forward to that. To the question, how do you avoid over-engineering, right? The quick answer to that is start lean, right? Focus on modularity, build models that can scale, can use containerized environments when you can. To fill that in a little bit more, over-engineering is kind of a common pitfall. I've done 4 startups in my career way back when, and I'm a software guy primarily. But when you are confronted with AI, there's just a temptation to build a race car, right? We need fast, we need better. How many GPUs? But if you do that, you run the risk of spending capital you don't have and really wasting a lot of time, money, and complexity. So, to the question, how do you avoid over-engineering? Start with the problem, not with the platform. What are you trying to solve? If you don't know where you're going, all roads will get you there. It's a New England phrase for those of you out of town. These most startups, they choose an infrastructure before really defining their problem. So focus your AI on a use case that's valuable would be one of my answers. Don't build a rocket ship to deliver pizza, right? I mean, if you're trying to figure out, what you want to solve and what you want to do, you might not need, the best, fastest, most current GPU. You might be able to get by very comfortably with something that's been out for a year and proven it's less expensive. So, reinventing the wheel slows you down. So leverage those pre-trained models, leverage the CUDA as an example. Choose the right size of compute. Don't over provision. That leads to unnecessary costs. Embrace cloud flexibility, right? I mean, why not use that to start with? There's a scaling issue that you want to be prepared for in the future, but if you're really beginning and starting out, the question is avoiding over-engineering. Embrace the cloud, right? Optimize before you scale. That's kind of an important one, because if you don't optimize before you scale, what do you do when you scale an inefficient product? You're just causing, more costs and adding more costs to the process. Moderate, right, or monitor and iterate. You spend all this time building a model, getting it ready, putting it in the wild, and you think you're done. No way are you done, right? Once that model goes into the wild, you have to constantly figure out, retrain it, make sure that it's becoming more efficient. If it's hallucinating, where, why? What are the data sets to it? I was here Monday and I heard MVP a lot, most or minimal valuable or viable product. Not a bad strategy, right? Don't try to boil the ocean. Fix something, do it well, build for scale, right? So avoiding this whole over-engineering, at least in my view. Stay lean, stay modular, stay focused, leverage the ecosystem that's there, validate early, scale when you need to, right? And build something that matters, I guess, is probably a good way to put a cap on that. That's my answers to that question.
Good answers.
Oh, you like it?
With the over-engineering piece too, you brought up a really good point where some people jump the gun a little bit over what they think they need when you talk about a minimal viable product. A good example, kind of blasted for a moment. A good example is sometimes we have people who are oftentimes experimenting in the cloud and then deciding to move on-premise. In the cloud, they'll use different GPUs because guess what? They have racks and racks and racks of these things, and they split them up and have tons of people use them all at once. They have different needs than what us as individual coders or startups or organizations need for our inferencing or for whatever small scale we're working at. So a lot of people will come to me and say, hey, I want the fastest possible GPU and I only want one of them. And my response is that's like putting Formula One tires on a minivan. It is really expensive and you might get really good grip, but it's not changing the speed of the car or the braking distance or things like that. So in reality, we need to look at what the hardware can do from a full stack. So that's server, storage, that's GPUs, the whole ecosystem that we have, and what do we need to start with? What is our tolerance in this experimentation or beginning stage? Additionally, too, is from a software perspective, looking at open source too. There are a lot of great ecosystems out there, tools. Many people think, I need the name brand product, right, or name brand car. Same thing with these tool sets. You might think you need something that's easily recognizable, and one of the benefits to that is support. However, when we're talking about starting out initially and trying to get that minimal viable product, open source can be a great basis for getting the technology under wraps and then knowing what feature sets you need moving forward so that when you do make an investment in getting a paid license tool, that you know exactly what it is you need and you can justify that cost moving forward. But additionally, talking about some LLMs as well, if that's part of the conversation too. When we talk about engineering these things, we don't always need to be fine-tuning, changing them, or using GPUs to pre-train these models. I think one of the things we've talked about in the industry is how models now are reaching a kind of apex of what we're learning off of training off of the internet. That's because we've trained these models off of most of the internet already. There's not much more data to grow on, and so what needs to change is the foundation of these transformer models or interactions with us and how we interact with these data platforms. That's why ChatGPT will train itself off of your chat logs. And so case in point is a lot of the work's already been done. and a lot of it is out there open source. You don't need to, you may see ChatGPT and say, I want to build a tool off of that. Well, you need to license that. There are open source versions out there that are incredibly comparable, and again, trained off of the same enormous data sets that all other models are. Slight tweaks that change the core functionality of it, but that's also something that you can get in and get your hands on and see what we can do with what's out there and available now.
Yeah, I don't want to be an NVIDIA commercial, but if you go to the NVIDIA website, they've taken a handful, a dozen or so LLMs and modified them for specific industries. If you look at healthcare, medical, right, there's a lot of nomenclature, a lot of taxonomy in those LLMs that wouldn't be in a standard 8 billion or 70 billion parameter LLM. They've customized those LLMs for specific industries. Think law, think medical, think architecture, a few others. And so if you just wanted to take a pre-baked LLM, download it, you're a lot farther along. There's no reason for you to buy 10,000 GPUs and make your own LLM unless you want to be, well, Goldman Sachs did it because they really wanted it to be a competitive advantage and distinctive for them. But for the most part, those LLMs are pretty rock solid and pretty good. Put a RAG in front of it, do whatever you want to do, make it your own, but leverage the technologies that's out there, like you said. Yeah, good point.
Yeah, and while we're on the topic of NVIDIA, it's probably a good time too. NVIDIA has a lot of offerings available for startups. So check out their website. Clyde's going to talk a little bit about their Inception program, but their Inception program for, we have seen a lot of successful organizations scale through their Inception program. They offer a lot of visibility for the right candidates into the program. Clyde, do you want to elaborate a little bit more on?
I'd love to. So here's an example of how cool NVIDIA might be. You know why no one's here from NVIDIA today? Because they have 2 days off for wellness, whatever. So everybody has the day off today and tomorrow at NVIDIA. Don't try calling them.
And they wouldn't even come in for us.
They wouldn't even come in, right? So anyway, so I am not an NVIDIA employee, but I do work with them pretty regularly. And I will say that they have a program designed for startups. It's called Inception. It's called the Inception program. So I can tell you that it provides technical guidance, marketing exposure, access to NVIDIA engineers. It's a little more than a program. It's actually kind of a community. So I don't want you to think that you can just sign up and they'll let you in, right? I mean, you have to qualify. You've got to have reasons to participate. But, to expand on that, the Inception program from a technical perspective, right, it gives you access to the full AI stack of software that NVIDIA offers. It gives you the ability to take a sneak peek at new technologies that are coming down the road. If you look at NVIDIA, every 6 or 8 months, they're coming out with a new iteration. It is one of their competitive advantages. It makes it hard as hell as a salesperson because it's like, well, what about this? Well, the supply chain takes this long. Well, there's a new one coming out, right? But they have a value-based pricing model, so whenever you get on the carousel, you're still going to get your value. So think about which technologies you want to base on, and even though a new one comes out, it doesn't mean you're in the dark. They'll support that. But you have a sneak peek to some of the new technologies that are coming out as well. There are credits, and there are infrastructure support GPU credits that you can achieve as part of the Inception program to help you, go along, get along, be more productive. And there's access to hardware environments that you can experiment before you deploy, right? And from a business side, they help with visibility, they help with co-marketing, they help with introductions into enterprise customers. And I don't want you to think, do not make the mistake. Right? 4 startups under my belt, I work at HPE, startups come into us as well. We, just like them, big, giant company, you knock on the door and you say, hey, can you introduce me to Bank of America? No, that's not how this works. But if you have a solution that makes sense, they will help guide you through that process and potentially give you the opportunity to involve yourself with some of their enterprise customers as they go forward, right? So, that's something you can do. Startups at the Inception program can be showcased. If you get in with the right sort, if you're the squeaky wheel in a polite way, they can invite you to some of their VC conferences, or they can invite you to some of their innovation sessions. And it's, it's your T&E to get there, right? And it's your idea that has to shine, but they can give you a forum or a format where you can start to maybe talk to people about what it is you provide and what you do. So that's, very valuable. You get access to engineers, of course, and architectural reviews. I know that there's a focus there on certain industries. If you have industries like healthcare or robotics, financial, FSI, manufacturing, generative AI, LLMs, They're very interested in understanding how to be competitive and how to be unique in that space. So if you've got a space, if you got a solution that runs in that area, that's pretty good. So the Inception program, I mean, it really is, it's a strategic program for startups in the AI space. NVIDIA, I like to tell people, it's like walking in with the prom queen around your shoulder. Like if you say I'm an NVIDIA partner, yeah, you know, people want to know who you are with them, right? You got a lot of work under your belt because, you know, they're a big company and you got to get attention. But if you're smart, if you're effective, if you're persistent, leveraging the program, the Inception program is pretty cool. And I tried to look up on the website the night before just to make sure I could have something to offer. But if you go to NVIDIA.com and look up startups, you'll be brought to a page that says, okay, big guy, apply, right? You know, and, you know, put your ideas down here. And I don't know what the response is. I know I work with a number of Inception or Ignite programs. So I know they're out there. I know they're effective. I personally work with some of the partners that come through that program. And frankly, I kind of use it as a vetting process. If they're good enough for NVIDIA, they're probably good enough for me to work with, right? So it's a great big check mark for me at HPE to say, all right, you know, who are these guys? How do they work? What do I want to bring them into my enterprise accounts? So that, again, I'm not an employee of NVIDIA. I don't sell the Inception program, but I can tell you that, or the Ignite program, but I can tell you it's worth looking into if you have a nascent or growing solution, AI-based, and especially if it's in some of those verticals that I mentioned. So that's how I would answer that as a non-NVIDIA employee.
Yeah, and I guess I would add to that. So they have an annual, actually, they have do it twice now, I think, GTC conference. They're doing one in Washington. They do one in San Jose in
San Jose is in March.
March.
GTC DC is in next month. I think it's the end of the month in
End of
Washington,
October,
DC.
yeah. And what they've evolved in is members of their Inception program, they have a showcase on the floor. And so they give the Inception programs a chance to interact with customers as well. I'd recommend also looking into it. There's several, I believe there's several in Boston. I mean, this seems to be biotech driven a lot out of here, but you might be surprised, you know, some of the peers of yours may have products in the group. So definitely worth checking out. We wanted to bring that up. So we talked a little bit about, we kind of went through this cloud versus on-prem. And, you know, there's a reason for a lot of things. But one of the things that we see is, you know, all of the hyperscalers have startup programs, right? We want to talk a little bit about when would you use the cloud and what are the risks with the cloud. And, you know, quite frankly, we'll talk a little bit about the solutions we have, but there's options of old school on-prem, and then there's alternative paths beyond the hyperscalers. So we just wanted to talk a little bit about when would you recommend a startup starting in the cloud or a cloud scenario versus then when going on-prem?
I'm going to push back on the old school comment, right? On-prem isn't old school. It is another way to solve the problem, right? So I'll throw a tomato at you with that one. But, you know, first, I mean, look, you know, cloud is ideal for early stage, right? Because of the flexibility there, because of the experimentation you can do, and because, you know, until your workloads are stabilized, it's a great place to start. And it might be a great place to continue, but it really depends on your business model, right? And your solution and how it kind of operates and how it works. The key to is to align that infrastructure to your growth, right? And to where that makes most sense. So what do I mean? First of all, you know, cloud versus on-prem. That's not a startup question. Every enterprise customer that I work with, the biggest ones, JP Morgan Chase to Regeneron to, you know, Walt Disney, struggle with that same question. There is a number of repatriation projects going on at HPE where people swung to the cloud and now they're coming back to an on-prem model or a hybrid model, right? So the answer isn't, there it is. The answer is what fits your business best, right? So I think that's the first question you have to ask yourself. You know, cloud offers that agility, right? That speed, low barrier to entry, great for startups, right? So, you know, it could be good for early stages. It could be good for if you need flexibility, if you really have minimal infrastructure overhead that you want to support, right? And It allows you, access without upfront costs. It gives you rapid prototyping. There's new models now in the cloud. I'm sure there's some cloud providers here. It's a pay-as-you-go or almost a utility-based model. That works really well for some folks, right? And it's easy scaling for peak demand. The nice thing about the cloud is, every quarter or every month I do year-end reports or month-end reports, and I spike my usage. The cloud can help you give you that elasticity where maybe an on-prem solution, you've got a pre-provision for that, and then you got idle time the rest. So yeah, those are some of the considerations. But if you look at on-prem as another way to look at this, especially as you scale, you get a lot more control over your costs, right? One of the challenges with cloud is you have unknown costs, depending on your usage. So if you own the infrastructure, you now have very predictable cost model. And that's important, especially as you want to scale and grow over. And you can measure your performance at scale a little more efficiently as well. So, it may make sense to bring your AI workloads in a predictable environment if you're very intense with your data usage, or if your data is very sensitive, right? You might want to keep that data close to your vest and keep it within your firewalls. So, that's a way to kind of think about it. And I also don't want anybody to forget, there's hybrid out there too, right? I mean, one size doesn't have to fit all. You can have some of your workloads in a hybrid model. Some applications are running on cloud, some are doing on-prem. So in my view, hybrid also is a very valuable kind of consideration when you think about delivering your outcome. And I focus on outcomes. Like in the end of the day, it doesn't really matter what the solution or infrastructure is. Is there business value that you're delivering? What's the outcome? And then the way you deliver it is part of that equation, right? So, typically you might start in the cloud. You might shift to on-prem when you want to scale or when you want to have your costs or control of that data demand it. But don't feel alone. Every industry, every enterprise that I talk to struggles with the question, when do I implement cloud? When do I go on-prem? When do I go hybrid? And it really is a little bit of a factor of the solution that you're trying to run, the outcomes you're trying to drive, the costs that you're trying to deal with, the data sensitivity you're trying to work with. So there's a lot that goes into that mix before you can build the cake. You had a metaphor that was not a good one. That's good, but I did the build the cake metaphor.
Yes.
Maybe you have a better one than that one.
One of the things I definitely do want to mention too, when we talk about on-prem, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to have a physical location on, if you're a small brick and mortar shop, if you're just renting out, a small office space, even if you're an enterprise and you have offices all over the country, it doesn't necessarily mean you need to have things physically there. On-prem, we work with these co-location facilities. So Equinix, Digital Realty, these are people who they know that people don't like having to worry about where's this going? How am I cooling it? How am I supplying power to it? It's a lot of work, and that's why there are IT folks, because there's entire jobs to take care of that. It's a lot of work. And so we do work with people where we give people on-prem capability, but we give them also a place for this stuff to live. And these can be high-end places with, water connections, whatever power connections you need, to make sure that, in case I think we joke sometimes that the most extreme edge that our servers go to is sometimes like right next to a Wendy's fryer. It's like the heat, the debris, the air quality probably isn't great, but we can make sure that there are good places for these things to run and to run clean and efficiently. Additionally, we oftentimes encounter now, because of cloud repatriation, a hybrid on-prem and in-cloud model, because the cloud, like you were saying, is really good for agility and starting up. However, maybe your data doesn't necessarily live there, or if you're connecting to customers' data, right? Can it go to the cloud? Is there personally protected information where it may become a legal issue if this is going to wherever the cloud is, right? If our data center's in X state, but healthcare patient data is in Y state, can it go over to someone else's location? Additionally, you may send that information there. You got to pay for that information to get out, even if you're getting out of the cloud game. So knowing about where your data lives, where your end users are going to be interacting with it is an important strategy because you cannot, we at HPE, we do hardware and a lot of on-prem, and we are not a cloud provider. However, we work in tandem because there are many things that should not exist on premises and should not exist on cloud from a cost and data perspective. And so a lot of things can live in between. So as you grow, as you start in the cloud or at a hyperscaler or neo cloud, and you decide, I want more control over what's going on. I need to make sure that I'm getting optimal performance. I want testing that's private, maybe air gapped, not on network. That's where I want to bring something on premise. We can work so that these systems can work in tandem together and exist on premise, but also spin up to the cloud as you have influx of user base. Because as time goes on, you're going and your startup gets business, you will have a better, more firm consolidation of your user base. And so if think about web pages, right? If we just launched the web page and did a Super Bowl ad, we're going to have a ton of traffic, and so we're going to need to spin that up and put it in the cloud so that we didn't buy everything for it. But once we get back to business hours on Monday, Tuesday, or even the next week, we're going to have a very consistent number of people coming in for regular business, and we'll be able to predict that. And that's something that we may take back over on premise so that we can have more control over it. Trying to think, I was going to mention one other thing. In terms of...
now you have to.
Yeah, now I have to. I can't say it out loud. I'm trying to jog my brain a little bit. One of the things about on-premise too is there are a lot of data concerns, with ransomware, with where things live. And a lot of the organizations I talk to, they're starting off with tools. They're starting off with, maybe it's they're purchasing data from organizations and ingesting it into a tool, or maybe they're producing data themselves and offering data as a service to their customer base. But the whole tech industry is incredibly sensitive over data right now because you're getting ransomware attacks, you're getting malware attacks, and data protection both in the U.S. and globally is becoming very, very strict. And so creating a plan early on in your planning stage is incredibly important to know where that data is going to live because, like I said, if it gets stuck somewhere and you need to move that data, you could be in trouble already for it being where it is if you didn't want it to be, or you're going to have to pay a cost to move that data because it's kind of like moving out of an old apartment or a home, right? You have to pay someone to help you out with all the heavy stuff, and data is heavy. It has very high gravity when you are moving it from place to place. So, but yeah, no, that is kind of my input on the on-prem versus
Can we
cloud.
talk about data for a minute?
We're
Okay.
Ticking along.
I'll let you
talk about it later.
more data if
Okay.
we have time, because we want to make sure we leave enough time for Q&A. And I think this is a good time, and I'm going to pull a couple of these questions together because we had many more to go through. But I want to just kind of paint the high level scenario of HPE, how we work in this ecosystem, what we bring, what we have to offer, and what we're seeing. So, as I said before, you're all startups. I'm sure that the hyperscalers are enticing, saying, for cloud credits, get started here. We do have alternatives to cloud providers. We are hearing repeatedly from startups that, when they're in an initial MVP and they go to one of the hyperscalers, everything seems reasonable. And then as they grow and they grow and they grow, the costs continue to add up. That's why we're seeing it. And it's not just startups. It's Clyde brought up enterprises as well. Now all of a sudden your cloud bill is extremely high. And there's a lot of folks that have gone to, look, when we talk about on-prem, just compute. That's something we offer. We have partnerships with colos. So that's one scenario. Sometimes it could be as easy as you don't need a data center, right? Especially in your early stages. The second thing we provide is when we talked about CPUs and GPUs in the cloud, we have a partnership program for companies that purchase HPE hardware it's called a Partner Ready Service Provider Program. So they are service providers on our behalf. They offer both GPUs and CPUs, and we can connect you. In the end, make sure we get our LinkedIn information, or we'll reach out to you. I think we're getting a list of the attendees, but we can connect you with a number of partners. And the third category I kind of wanted to cover is when we talk about GPUs. Is anybody here at a point where they're doing training in need of GPUs? Okay, perfect. Okay, so I just spent a little bit of time. I'm sorry, what? Oh, okay, perfect. Well, that's why I want to leave some time for Q&A, because I'd love to hear what you guys are doing. But when so I was with HPE in the software space for many years, and I built our SaaS business, and then I left and I went into the startup world, and I came back and I had no idea what I was getting back into. This whole neocloud and GPU and CSP space has changed dramatically. Our team was created right at the boom. You remember the Crusoes of the world, and now we have CoreWeave and Nebius. And so we work with several of the neoclouds. It wasn't even called a neocloud. I think the neocloud is just, not everybody knows it is neo. We call it neoclouds, right? But
It's a buzzword, I feel like at this point, but yeah.
yeah.
It is.
So I mean, we're in a really interesting time when it comes to it, and I've been in this industry for a long time, but we're at a really interesting time. And the good news is you have choices. You're not, the neocloud, in my opinion, the neocloud ecosystem came out of the fact that everybody didn't want to go to the hyperscalers for their GPUs. They wanted alternatives. They wanted flexibility. It's the perfect environment for fast-moving startups because there's a lot of flexible options. Like, there's a lot more flexibility. You can get better rates. You can get rates for committed capacity, but if you just need to do some short-term runs, you pay a little more. So Tom from WhiteFiber was supposed to be here today, but he had a board meeting. WhiteFiber is one of our neocloud partners. They just IPO'd. It's an interesting race to see. And I want to, like I said, have a little bit of time to talk through. Several folks said they knew about the neocloud space, but at the end of the day, we have, like I said, from an HPE perspective, we'd love to work with anybody that's open to wanting to have a conversation. We have a lot of options, and we are building a network within the ecosystem. We even have some partnerships with some finance organizations. So it's a little commercial for us, but hopefully, the big thing we wanted to do is make sure that we kind of gave you our opinion on how you can go to market quickly and that you do have options. And I'm going to turn it over to Clyde and Colin for any.
Yeah, one thing I do want to mention with the buzzword neocloud, if you're not familiar with it, the big differentiation is that if you're going to go to AWS, Google Cloud, all the big hyperscalers, first and foremost, they're multi-purpose, right? So you have a lot of competing data storage, compute, networking, things like that. The neoclouds are really focusing on GPU workloads, and what they're doing is they are providing the cutting-edge GPUs faster than AWS and others, because they are repurposing things for a whole stack of various workloads that are non-AI, that don't need the bleeding edge. And so they're also able to do this at a reduced cost. People are leaving hyperscalers like AWS after experimenting, but what's happening is they're making a little bit of a mistake, because sometimes they're taking advantage of I'm using AWS as an example, but it's also kind of most well known. So, but if you go to any cloud, right, they're going to give you a lot of free credits, and free credits when you are a startup and experimenting are great. We would love to test it out for free. The issue is when that first due comes, and you say, okay, great, now we want to move off. Maybe we should move over to this neo cloud that's specialized, and we can get some cost savings now that we've done it for free. Issue is all your stuff is now on AWS or Google Cloud and wherever it may be. And now you have to get it off, and you will pay egress fees for that. So it's not just the bill for usage, it is the bill to take everything you have built on there off and now move it to a neo cloud. So That's kind of why we're seeing some differentiation, and people are looking at this Neo Cloud specifically first and foremost, because it is a better holistic strategy for their long-term development rather than saying we want to start on the cloud, on a generic cloud, and then move off, because enough people are doing that generic clouds are going to make that difficult and expensive. So.
Me? Well,
You got anything to add, or we're going to turn it over to the crowd?
Well, I do. I guess, my final, this was a startup kind of crowd, so I got 4 startups under my belt. Now, this is in the 90s during client server, right? So, like, I'm an ancient guy when it comes to that part of startup technology. But fundamentally, there's things that are, I think, transcend all of that. And the first is start with a clear problem, right? Use the proven tools that are out there, especially in today's market. There's a ton of great tools. Don't reinvent the wheel, right? Build on what works, scale smart. Actually wrote a little checklist for myself so I could remember, right? So start with that real problem. It's not just about cool technology. Solve something meaningful, please, right? I mean, the world needs it, right, for one. But, AI is an engine. It's not the destination. Don't get so focused on the technology. What are you trying to solve? What value are you trying to bring? Use existing tools, right? That's an easy one. Don't reinvent the wheel. Optimize early and optimize often. Right? When you talk about training your models and you talk about getting that into the wild, you are not done. Efficiency is a competitive advantage. So leverage that when you put all that together. Sage words of advice for me. Focus on data, right? Data quality is important. I was going to talk about data. I'm going to slip it in here, right? Garbage in, garbage out. If your data sucks, so does your output, so does your outcome. Make sure your data is aligned. And one of the problems that many companies have is they don't know where their data is, right? I interviewed 6 CDOs for CDO Magazine just recently, right? Workday and Pepsi, and it's pretty interesting to see how these landscapes have evolved. Workday was born in the cloud. They have a much better handle on their data, so they can do things like agentic AI because the data sets are ready for it. But if your data is lousy, your outcome will be lousy. So focus on the quality of your data, bias in your data, right? All these are important components when you build AI, because that's the foundation your AI is getting its information from.
What do we say? Crap in, crap out.
Garbage in, garbage out. That's what
Yeah.
it's a family event, okay?
Generational things
So-
going on here.
So yeah, focus on that data. Stay lean, iterate fast, continue to iterate, and build for impact, right? I mean, when I talk to enterprises, what is AI going to do? It's either going to do what you're doing already a little more efficiently, or you're starting a brand new thought in the process. And whatever it is that your solution does, make sure you can measure that impact, because that's where the ROI is going to come from. That's what someone's going to say, yep, I'll pay for that. I'll struggle through it. I got 15 decisions to make. I'm going to decide to work with you because this is going to make a difference in my customer experience, in my reporting, or in my innovation, or whatever it might be. So yeah, focus on the input. Start with purpose, build with efficiency, scale with strategy. That was my big wrap up. Did you like it? That was pretty good. So
I want to definitely open it up to questions. I know we need to get you mics because we have some remote folks that want to hear the questions as well.
Hi, thank you so much. It was a great talk. So, Barbara, I didn't know what hyperscalers mean, but we use the AWS, and I didn't know inference means you basically start training your own AI. We use LLM, GPT's API, and we are in women's health, space. Going back to your talk about LLM, I am planning to choose a base model and train it in the future. We need an AI that's based on women's health, and how does that work? Like when we train it, is that model ours in terms of from the investor perspective, because we need to raise funds. So if we get a base model, train it with our own data, is that model ours now? Because it wasn't, you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's going to depend on the licensing for that model. Again, if you are utilizing ChatGPT, they're going to have some pay model, right? And then, you may not be able to do as much versus there may be some open sources where it says, hey, you can use this for anything, but you can't use it for profit, right? Maybe it's educational or things like that. So you definitely need to, if you're asking about that, about ownership, you definitely need to check once changes are made to the model if that's included in their licensing agreement, the free use agreement, and then also a delineation between some of the terms: training, fine-tuning, and inferencing. Training is building the model from scratch. That's starting nowhere, and we are ingesting a gigantic amount of information in to train it. And then that is what gives us pre-trained models. I think GPT stands for Generalized Pre-trained Model. So it is pre-trained, it has been built. Fine-tuning is you have this large neural network with all the nodes and interconnections. If you've seen that image before, fine-tuning is doing shunting a little bit of information through it, not as much as what you trained it on, but still a relatively large amount of data, and shifting some of those weights a little bit. So that might be where we get some specialization, or but a changing of what the base model is. And then finally, inference is running that in a productionalized environment. I can say, I've built a model. What are we going to do with it now? Now we need it to connect to an API and it runs. That's a lot faster because you aren't pushing data through it. It's just the model running now. However, there's also technology, RAG, retrieval augmented generation, where we can query existing data in databases, in a vector database. So if I have a bunch of PDFs, files, things like that the model wasn't trained on, it can pull in just those data sources, and it's very lightweight, and it doesn't require training of it, but it also allows live data connections, so you don't have to, because one of the issues of training is that if you have new data and you want the base model to have that knowledge, you would have to retrain it every time. But again, retrieval augmented generation, RAG, is a technology to use for off-the-shelf stuff that can integrate data in and give your LM expanded knowledge. But yeah, as far as the ownership goes, that's probably going to be a model-by-model licensing basis.
If I could comment too, there's a woman by the name of Susan Sly. She has created a company called Pulse. Women's health issues are under funded, and there's not a lot of data sets to work with. So Susan is a 3-time entrepreneur, I think. If you look her up, she's pretty impressive. Her current company called Pulse is doing just exactly that through wearables and through other devices, collecting a massive amount of women's health data, and you might want to reach out to her for some additional insight. You'll find her, she's pretty visible on the internet.
Yeah, and the other thing I was going to suggest too is follow up with me. We have a partner, STN, which works specifically in the women's health area. So definitely send me a note and I'll get you some connections.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Tony Sam, founder of Spur. Spur is a technology platform that democratizes community development and community building. We currently have our cloud in Azure, and we have 2 GPUs on-prem. My question to the panel, to Clyde,
2 of us.
yeah, 2 of you in particular,
Two
is
smart guys.
is to sort of understand. Thank you, by the way, for this very good introduction. This sounds like a very powerful alternative to AWS and the other superscalers. Now, if I were to ask you to summarize the top 3 benefits of using NVIDIA and HPE as an alternative to these 3 hyperscalers on the technology and economics fronts, what would these 3 highlights are?
Well, I want to start with one because we didn't get through this, so we were going to. Financially, we have moved customers to alternatives, and they have shown 50% savings.
Yeah, I'd go innovation. I mean, HPE is a 75-year-old company, and I'd love to say we're the massive innovators in the world. We're pretty darn good at it, right? But we do infrastructure, we're steady, we're stable, we're secure. We have technologies that are pretty rock solid. You combine that with the innovation that NVIDIA brings to the picture, and I think that marriage really provides some significant advantages. One of your other questions was, 2 GPUs and in Azure, and I'm not quite sure where that question was.
non-technical.
Good. So we can go out drinking because we have smart people somewhere else that solve those problems. But when you look at, first of all, Azure runs almost all of their back engine is on HPE hardware. So thank you. You're a customer even though you don't know it, right? But when you talk about scale and you talk about really production and you talk about ownership and predictable costs, those are the issues that most people start to get concerned about. Nothing wrong with AWS, right? They have credits. You build SageMaker. It's great to experiment. But now when you're ready to scale, how do you want to do that? That marriage between HPE and NVIDIA for this PC AI, private cloud AI technology that is fundamentally optimized to specifically run AI workloads, that's a place to look if you wanted to bring it in-house, right? Low cost of entry, there's a dev kit, and it can scale, blah, blah. So it's, that's one place to look. HPE also has our own cloud. It's called GreenLake. So we have utility-based billing. So if you look at all the hyperscalers and you want another solution to consider, you can look at GreenLake and what GreenLake provides. So I think you have a lot of options. Did I hit 3? Because you gave me.
I got one.
Oh, you got one.
So, yeah. Another thing too is there's something called MLPerf, which is how we benchmark performance of machine learning models, specifically now with LLMs and how they perform. HPE's hardware that holds NVIDIA, this is everything from GPUs. We also have converged system boards, the Grace Hoppers, which is a very specialty board with an special ARM processor. We are hitting records for performance on these systems. So we are engineering the servers, the boxes that they're going in, to take the most advantage of the GPUs as well. So one of the things we sometimes look at, PCAI is a good example because we create different sizes for different use cases. But in reality, they can stretch into the upper bounds of those needs. So for example, we have a small one just for inferencing, but then if someone goes, I'd like to try a little bit of fine tuning, instead of saying, oh, sorry, you need a bigger size. Like, no, you really can, because we're taking as much advantage of the technology as we possibly can. Additionally, we're doing some things with NVIDIA hardware that other OEMs aren't necessarily doing. A great example with the specialty board, we're the only ones putting them in and having them talk to each other in a single server, which is, not to get, I'm the technical guy, so I don't want to go too deep.
Could you tell?
But there's some really impressive stuff we're doing that what may require 12 GPUs to run, we can get it down to just 2, a single box. So, that's a cost, that's a licensing, that's a support. Even if you're in the cloud, if they're constrained to that other hardware, even if it is HPE, it may not necessarily be some of the newer stuff we're pushing out because the cloud needs it to be commoditized, right? The general populace needs these things so they can general purpose it. We can get some things on-prem that are, or in our GreenLake cloud, that are really specialized, and again, they're like those cars that you don't really expect to be really fast, and then they just take off on the street. So they are pretty impressive. So again,
He just moved to Boston. He's getting used to the traffic. That's all that is.
I know we're tight on time. So what I do want to offer up to anybody, our information is available probably
Through our website, when you go to individual sessions, you should be able to access their information LinkedIn. Otherwise, definitely take pictures if you have not already, and do some stalking. That's what we're all here for, to make connections.
But we love the opportunity. This is like I said, this is an interesting time, and just in general, right? You have options. We would love to help you figure out what the right options are, if it makes sense. So we're excited and glad you could attend.
Yes, thank you so much to our speakers. Big round of applause for them. We have a lot more in store both today and for the rest of the week. There are a lot of different side events happening throughout the city tonight, so definitely check them out using the link in the Slack channel. And we also have the Massachusetts Climate Tech Studio Finale Showcase. Say that 5 times fast. This happening this evening as well, right here at Suffolk University. We know that you want to mingle after the event. We absolutely encourage it. The only thing that I ask is that you do not do it in this room, so that we can reset for the next sessions that will be coming through. Do want to give a huge shout out and thank you to HPE and NVIDIA for sponsoring this session. Without partners like this, Startup Boston Week would not be able to take place. So thank you very much for all of your time, your contributions, and sponsoring this wonderful conference. Lastly, you've all seen a lot of photographers mingling around. Kevin Tai from 3 Circle Studio is our official photographer. So grab him for a photo. You'll get a personalized Startup Boston Week photo album to look back on all year round. If you have not done so already, I do have the QR code here that you can scan. It's kind of tied to your face, so you'll get like notifications and a customized photo library for you. Otherwise, that's it. We are right on time. Go us, and enjoy the rest of your week. Enjoy the rest of your sessions. Thanks so much.